Hi, my name is Tony. The video you're about to watch is on black and gray shading. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to show you how to do black and gray shading, and this is the piece that we're going to do right here, this cow skull, and this is an original drawing, so we're going to teach you how to do all this black and gray shading in here, the dark stuff in the eyes. I'm going to show you, this is the stencil that I made, and you can see that there's not a lot of detail done in the center of the skull. Just the basic outside of it is what you're going to use. Everything else is going to be done. That's going to be all free-handed in, and you'll see how that's all done. The things you're going to need to do black and gray shade, obviously, are going to be some black ink, and we're going to use witch hazel to thin the inks down to get those different gray shades in there. And what I've done is I've set up a few color cups here, and we're going to start them with the darkest one, and I'm going to take this, I'm just going to fill it up. I'm going to use this one straight black ink. I'm going to use that for the outline of some of the real black shade. Then we're going to do them by the drip. We're going to do, in this one, we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to do 1, 2, 3 drips in that one, 1, 2 drips in that one, and just 1 drip of ink in that cup. This one you're not going to want to touch your solid black. The other ones, and then you can just fill them up. And you can use witch hazel, you can use alcohol, and some inks are water-based, and you can use water to thin them down. That's another way to do it. And once you get those in there, you can either stir them up with a little toothpick, or you can use a little ink mixer. You can put it in there, and it'll just mix them up a little bit. And that's about all you need to do to mix them, is all. I'm going to use a number 5 outliner, and I'm going to use a 7 shader to do this, so you can use one tube. This is a 7 or 5 tube, so that'll work. What we're going to do is we're going to start with an outline on this piece. You can see, like I showed you on that stencil, we've got a real basic outline to work with, because the inside is what's going to be filled up with color. Remember, you got to start at the bottom of the piece and work up. Some of these lines on this stencil that we've got on here are going to be more for just for shade lines. So that's what we want it to look like. We'll just follow that through. We're using a 5 outliner on this piece, like I showed you before, and the reason is you want a little bit thicker line when you're doing a black and gray shaded piece, so it stands out a little better. Just wipe it away so you can see where you're working. There's not a lot of outline to this piece either. This goes pretty fast. Most of the work's done with the shader. I'm putting the Vaseline over it just to keep that thing from smearing up when you're wiping the ink. And we should talk all about that in the first video. So this is pretty much what you learned before. You can hear I don't have the machine running super fast. It's a little bit faster than we'll do for the shading, but it gives it a nice smooth line. Just keep continuing going through the whole thing. Try not to smear up your stencil while you're working. When I do this feather outline, You can leave this a little choppy too because it makes it look more realistic. It doesn't have to be such a perfect line for each one of these things when you go through it. And just wipe it off so where you're at. The lines in the inside that feather, the ones that come down that make the little accents in there, you don't have to follow those exactly in a stencil. Just highlight a couple of them because you're going to do it with the shader, and you're going to make them stand out more and make them look like the feather. But you want a couple darker lines in there so you can do those with the outline. Just a couple. That's all you need. The bottom of this feather is solid black, so you don't have to mess around down there. Once you learn a little bit more, you can go about the speed I'm drawing here. It takes some time to get your speed up, so don't feel like you have to draw everything as quick as I'm going here. I've been tattooing for a while, so it's a little bit easier for me to follow these lines. If you have to, you don't want to go too slow. You want to, otherwise you get dots in the. When you're making the lines, you want the outlines to come out so they're all smooth, solid lines like that. About done with this whole side here. And I'm just using straight black outline ink on this. I'm not doing anything with those different shades of ink yet. This is all just a solid black. The straight black ink. Normally when you're holding this, you'll be pulling back and stretching the skin out. I'm trying to hold it a little different so you can see it. So you can kind of follow what I'm doing here. The tighter you stretch that skin, the better it goes in, and it goes in a lot quicker. I'm done with that side of it anyway. A little bit more. These cracks that are in the skull head, you just kind of you don't have to follow that, what you drew in that stencil exact, you know, you can freehand them a little bit, wherever you think you might want to flip one, just for accent anyway. You'll see when you go to shade that a lot of these accent lines in here are going to be where you're going to shade off of. So like there's one up here, there's a dark little spot in the skull that's going to be shaded out. That one doesn't necessarily need an outline, but if you think you're going to lose it, you can just put a couple little lines there, just like that, just so you remember that there's an accent piece going to go in there. You'll see how that, when I start shading it, what that's going to look like. And this is the outline now. It's all finished up, so we'll wipe it off and you can see what it looks like. Now some of these purple lines I didn't put in because I'm going to do those with the shader, like this little fuzz stuff around the feathers and some of these lines in here. And we switched this over now. The machine's now got a 7 shader needle in it. And we're going to start out, remember I showed you at the beginning and I put the drips in there, and I'll tell you as I'm going along whether I'm using straight black ink or I'm shading out. I'm going to start out with just the straight black ink first, and you want to do some of the dark spots in there like the eyes and the end of this feather. So we'll start with that. I'm going to color this in. This is just going to all be straight black ink here for a little bit. Some of these pieces you're not going to color all the way to the line. Some of this stuff will be. This solid black is going to be right to the line, to the outline. You try to get the effect of an eagle feather on this, so you want to have a black tip on it. Once you start coming up to the center of the feather, the quill, you can start feathering that actually with the machine. Just kind of pull it out a little bit, lift and pull it, so it won't be real solid next to the quill. It'll give it more feather look. Now when you get down towards the middle here, you can leave a little bit of a space so it'll look like that quill coming right down into all the way to the end of the feather. And then just start pulling it out. And this is still all with solid black ink. And this is like a bear claw. And that one I'm going to color to the edge, but I'm going to shade it lightly. I'm going to pull it out a little bit. But still remember, you got to have a dark side to everything. So, you know, you're gonna take, even in that bear claw, you want a little bit darker on the one side, and then we'll start gradually lightening up that ink. I showed you how you got the ink all at different dilutions. I've got it diluted at different levels, but some of this stuff you can do without even doing that. Now I'm gonna take a little. This ink is the one with the 4 drip in it, and that one you can just pull the points of these feathers out so you can get a little bit more contour shape to it. Just kind of follow in between those lines that you put in. On this video, some of these lines are going to look just as dark as they did with the solid black ink, even though I'm using a diluted ink. And that's because the blood now that's coming up in the skin is going to act like ink also, and it's going to darken up what you have. But when this heals, you're going to get a real nice soft effect on the spots that you use the diluted ink on. So you got to remember that when you're doing a black and gray shaded piece, it might look too dark, and you got to let your customer know it's going to look a little dark when you first do it, but it will lighten up. And I'm still using some of that one with the 4 drip ink in it. You'll see the effect that you're going to get. Just a little shadow underneath that tooth. You go right through the quill with that. It'll give it some nice dimension, and it'll look like there's a little bit of a shadow underneath that. Then you go to one of the, I'm going to take a little bit of ink that's been diluted down to about 2 or 3 drips. You can use the 2 drip one and just kind of real softly just color along the edge of the feather. Almost like you're trying to fill it in, but you're just going to add just a little bit of grayness to it. Now we're going to work this part of the horns here, and I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to start with the solid black ink and just kind of pull it out and shade it. This is where I'm going to show you don't want to go all the way to the edge of the outline. You want to give yourself, leave that up, and where you're just putting it in and pulling it out, so it'll give you a little bit of a shaded look. And you want to create these spirals on the horn. You see how you don't go right to the edge? You want to leave that little bit of white line in there. You can go with, you're just going to have to kind of just take the ink and use those color cups with the different drips in them. I'm going to use a little softer one in this spot right here to show you the difference. It almost gives the same effect as the solid black because you can see a little bit of more blood coming up through there, but this will be lighter than this will. It'll start darkening and it'll start lightening as it goes to the top. The one that only has 1 drip of ink, that's probably not going to be even used much in here, just in the face part of it, of the skull, when you get to that. Most of this is done with a little bit darker, but you're pulling the ink in and out as you do it. So just follow this all the way up, and just remember, don't go to the edge of the line. Leave that line out. So you can still see a little bit of the outline there. You can go back over this to get those, you want these spiral lines to look like that. They give that horn kind of an effect that is round. Same thing on the top, just kind of follow it through like that. And that's what it should look like when it's shaded. Now we're going to do around these ropes here too. I'm using solid black ink, and I'm just going to follow up and give them a little bit of shadow going around them, kind of in between the lines that I already drew on there. It'll kind of thicken those lines up, and then where that tooth is hanging off, you want to shade that up. You gotta remember, this is the dark side of it, so the underneath side. You keep drawing that ink up till you get a nice looking shade. And once you get some of that black shade in there, then you can go to, this is like 3 drips in here of black. And you can kind of just color over it. I'm going to do the eyes. Those in the inside of these eyes, that's solid black. If you do a black and gray shade piece, you definitely want to use some solid black in these pieces. If you do the whole thing with just gray, the whole piece will look too soft. It'll look too washed out. You'll have no contrast to anything. You'll see that'll pull the eye color right out. Same thing in the nose piece here too. I'm going to start with this dark. This I'm going to eventually lighten up. You've got that drawing so you can keep looking back to that as a reference. If you're working from your own original piece of work, you probably won't have to, but if it's a piece you've never done before, you're going to want to keep referring to that, to where the dark and lights are in the piece. It's better when you're doing something to kind of use your own artistic ability on this too, then, so you're not just like duplicating every single piece the exact same. You could do the same piece 2 times and it'll look different both times. If you do this center stuff with a little more freehand work, then try to follow it like a coloring book. You're going to get a nicer look when it's done. Parts of these skulls now, I'm going to use a little bit more washed out ink. This is about 3 drips in here. And again, you don't want to take anything all the way to the edge of the outline. Leave a little bit of a gap. It'll have a much nicer look when it's all done. Just going to wipe this off a little bit so you can kind of see where we're going with it. You get a better look. You can see how it's starting to get shaded up in here. I'm going to work on these eyes too, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use one that's got about 3 drips of black ink in it, and you want to start. It kind of looks a little smeary when you start doing it that way. But it gets a really nice effect. It'll be a softer look when it's done. Again, don't go to the outline. I stress that a lot because you'll see the difference. If you color it all the way up to the edge, you'll have no contrast to this whole thing. It'll all look like it's one, like you just colored it in like a coloring book. And that's not what you're trying to get. If you start seeing more blood than you do ink, that's okay, because there is some ink in there, and that's going to be the real light shade. So don't overwork them either. You know, once you get it where you think it looks good, you could always go back and darken something up, but you can't lighten it. So it's kind of important not to overwork a piece that you're not sure. If you're not sure you want a dark spot there, then don't make it dark. Make it a little bit lighter. Even when you're done doing this piece, you can take a look at it and you'll see what it's going to look like. And you might go back in and touch up little pieces here and there. That's why it was important when we did the outline to show all those little cracks in there, because it gives you space to fill in. You're not just filling in the thing solid. These cracks give some separation to each different shade. Now you're starting to get some dimension to the piece. You can see how flat it looks here and how it starts to look like it's coming in. Remember in the outline when I showed you that I put that little mark up there, that little, it looks like an upside down U there, because that's going to be a darker indentation in the skull. So that one you could start out with just some solid black, and just this one you want to go right up to that because you don't want to see that outline piece there. But feather it out past it. It'll give it a nice look when it's done. It'll make it, give it a little dent in there. If you notice on this piece, that's the outline stopped about right here, but I'm going to follow that same line and shade up past it, and now it'll make it look like it drops off and goes to the other side, just by following that without having an outline in there. This will almost create your own outline on the edge. This piece, we're shading the skull kind of like towards the center. I'm bringing everything in towards this center here. So, and I'm doing this with about 3 drips of ink in there. This is not, the skull piece itself doesn't have too much solid black in it. The solid black is saved for the eyes and the nose pieces here. You want to pull these when you're doing this, kind of as you're sweeping it out. You don't want to see a lot of little dotted lines when you're doing that. Try to get it so it's kind of a smoother look. Just slowly go out. If you find that you got too much of a dotted line look, go to take the ink that's even washed out even more with maybe just like 2 drips. And just kind of go over it, so then you'll start getting a smoother. It'll start smoothing the lines out. Do the same thing on this nose piece. Don't hit the outline again. Just kind of bring it out. This is like 2 to 3 drips in this one I'm using. You can use either one depending on how dark you'll see the amount of pressure you're putting on it as you're doing it too. If you're using the one that's got 3 drips in there and it's still coming out too dark, either just lighten up a little bit or go to the next one. You know, take something that's not as concentrated with ink. And I'm not cleaning the needle out in between when I'm switching these colors like you do with different colors, because there's enough of that witch hazel or alcohol in there that once you dip the needle in, it's pretty much washing out the darkest stuff. You know, if you go from real black to real light, then you might want to wipe it off or spray a little alcohol through your machine if you're afraid you're getting too much black ink built up in the tube and it's not coming out soft as you want it. Then you can just take your needle and just hold it up and just give it a little spray of alcohol, and it'll clean out some of the heavy black residue that's already in there. And then when you start hitting your lighter colors, they'll come out a little softer. Probably not a bad idea to do every once in a while, just so you're kind of working with a clean tube then all the time. It doesn't get too clogged up with black ink. I'm going to wipe this down again. We're getting to the end of this right now. You can kind of see what we went through, all the different shades in here. Just finishing up on the end of the last horn. You can go back and look if there's any spots that you think you need to darken or lighten. You can just go back in or darken. Actually, you can't really lighten much, but you can shade some stuff out if there's nothing in it. You can add a little bit of that lighter shade, just any blank spots that you might think need a little bit of ink in them. If you wanted to add some color to this, you could put some color in those little leather bands. There's a little symbol on this side. We're going to leave that open. He can decide what he wants to put in it later. Back up to the last horn now, same thing, back to the real black, and we'll give you a good look at the whole thing when it's done here. I'll show you what it looks like. If there's anything you didn't follow with, as far as the way the machine's running or the needle configuration, stuff like that, that's all on the first video. So if you've watched that one, you should know what's going on pretty much. This video we're making here today was made for people that have already seen that or that already know how to pretty much use the equipment. We didn't go through all the basics of how to work the machines and how to set them and adjust them. That's all on the first video, so you can watch that. You can refer back to that if you see something here you don't remember. Geez, how did he set that up? How did that needle go in there this way or that way? But at this point, you should have done a lot of practice tattoos already, and you're getting into some of the more artwork and stuff. We have other videos that are going to show some color pieces on them and restoring old tattoos, things like that. So there's a lot to learn if you just watch them. But you can always refer back to these if you got a piece to do and you don't remember. You can look at it, and it should remind you how to do it. And that's about it. I'm going to wipe it off, and then we'll show you what it looks like. And that's what it looks like when it's all finished. That's a little symbol. We left that open. He may add something in there later. But you can see everything is shaded from the top down. You can see where all the lights and darks come in. And that's pretty much what it should look like. You can always go back, like I said, after it heals, a lot of this is going to lighten up and turn to a real soft gray shade. So better off leave it the way it is, and then you can always go back after about 3 weeks and take a look at it and make sure it looks the way you want it.